Hi, my name's Alistair Chapman, and in this video I want to take a look at this monitor, the LH7P from Portkeys. Now, I do already own quite a few different monitors, especially around the sort of 7-inch, 5-inch size, and I use them quite a lot. But I got this one specifically for a job, and that was for filming at Glastonbury, where I filmed the theatre and circus. This year I shot the theatre and circus using a Sony FX3 and a Sony A1, and I wanted a monitor that would allow me to control the cameras wirelessly, so I didn't have to use the small touchscreen on the back of the camera to control the camera, especially for the autofocus while shooting. And the Portkeys LH7P can do that. It's a 1000 nit monitor. It runs off an NPF battery, a standard Sony NPF battery, so low-cost batteries. Has a DC input and an HDMI input with an HDMI loop through. There's no SDI on this monitor, and comparing it to my other monitors in terms of color accuracy and things like that, it's actually really pretty good. I think I would say that it's not the best quality monitor in the world by any means, but you have to bear in mind that this is actually a relatively low-cost monitor, and I think for the price it works really well. It's fully featured, but the big one for me is that connectivity using Wi-Fi with the Sony cameras. You can also use Bluetooth with a lot of the Blackmagic cameras to control the camera using the touchscreen. Pairing the monitor to the camera is pretty straightforward. On the camera, I'm going to connect via Wi-Fi, and one of the first things to check is that the Wi-Fi band that you're going to use is 2.4 gigahertz. This needs to be set to 2.4 gigahertz under Wi-Fi frequency band in the network settings. And then we go to Control and PC Remote and to the PC Remote function page here and select Enter. Go down to Wi-Fi Direct Info, press Select, and then you have to go Exit and go to Next to get to this page here that says Operate the connecting device and connect to the device. Now on the monitor, touch the screen to bring the menus up, and we go to the camera option, and we're going to connect via Wi-Fi 2.4 gigahertz. So we go to Add a new device. It will scan, and you can see here it's come up with this camera. The name there matches the name on here. So we select that, and now we enter the password that is here on the camera, 34. Click OK. It's connecting to the camera, and it's now connected. Once the camera is paired, we can come out of the main menu, and we have now got the ability to control the camera. So if I go up here, I can select the different white balance options that are available in the camera. Come out of that. I could go to function here. I can change the mode that the camera is currently in. You can see currently we're in the normal video mode, but I could switch to S and Q. But I think the most exciting one really, and the one that most people are going to use, as well as being able to change things like the aperture, shutter speed and things like that, is focus. So if I touch on focus here now, I have additional controls for the focus. Now, one of the things that is a little bit frustrating is to be able to use the touch menu on the monitor. Go back to focus. You want to have touch focus turned off. So at the moment touch focus is back on, touch focus is off, and now I can go into the various menu options on here. But to be able to use touch focus, I have to turn that to on, and now the touch screen becomes a touch focus touch screen. So I can touch where I want the camera to focus, and the focus tracking on the camera will take over, and you can just touch to focus. And I think this is one of the particularly useful tools in this monitor, and this is one of the things that when I used it at Glastonbury was very, very useful, just being able to touch where you wanted to focus. Now the thing that you don't get though is the tracking box. That's not shown, and that's because Sony don't output it on their Wi-Fi output or on the HDMI output. But you can touch to focus wherever you want. You can also, if you don't want to use touch to focus, let me turn that off, we can change the focus mode. I could go to manual focus, and now I can use these controls to manually focus the camera. It's a little bit clunky, I have to say. It's very difficult. I probably wouldn't use this myself, but you do have that control. My preference is to use autofocus. Camera's now in the standard AFC mode. If you want, you can change your tracking area or your focus areas as well. But really, it's the ability to turn on the touch tracking and touch to focus. Really is one of the great things about this monitor that I really do like. In terms of the features that you'd normally find on a monitor, you have peaking, you have zebras, you have false color, you have pinch to zoom, so you can zoom in and out of the image, and all of the things that pretty much every monitor on the market today does have. It's all there. You can add your own LUTs for when you're shooting with log. On the top of the monitor, you have 4 function keys, F1 through F4, and these can be assigned to things like peaking and zebras. There is a switch that locks out the touchscreen functions, so if you want to turn touchscreen functions off, you can use that switch. This is for the battery release, and the on-off switch for the power. Underneath the monitor there is a DC input socket. It takes 7 to 24 volts, HDMI in, headphone socket, USB socket, and use the USB for loading things like lookup tables, and then there's an HDMI loop through and an HDMI out. There's a 1/4-20 mounting point here, as well as one on each side of the monitor. But the big one for me was being able to use touch to focus. So I can set up the autofocus, turn on touch tracking from the monitor, and then touch the screen where I want the camera to focus. Now the only downsides are you don't see the tracking box on the monitor screen, so you're either going to have to look at the screen on the camera to see where it currently is tracking, or just touch the screen again to focus where you want the camera to focus. When I used it at Glastonbury, I didn't really find the lack of a tracking box to be a problem. I would simply touch where I wanted the camera to focus, and then the camera took over from there. So overall, LH7P from Portkeys, I really find it to be a very useful monitor. I think given the price that it is, it represents excellent value for money. The build is a little bit plasticky perhaps, but that does make it very, very light, and if you're using a camera like an A7S3 or an FX3, which is already very light, you don't want a heavy monitor. But despite mostly being made of plastic, it does feel robust enough to stand up to professional use, provided you're not exceptionally rough with it. Would I recommend it? Yes, if you want that touchscreen control of your camera, if you're using a Sony FX series camera or an Alpha, absolutely. I can recommend this as a really nice monitor option.